Matt Burke spoke about a few things. And I know for you watched the film, and we watched, the issues the defense had in the front seven with the quarterback rush and the regular rush with Zach Moss.
Well, we talked about it a little bit after the game. This is something that was obvious just watching the game live, and then you and I talked about it over the last couple of days, and it's just this is one of those moments, once again, Ron, where in what we do, sometimes you gotta be critical. Hell, I mean, in how I do it, I got to be critical more times than not. Covering this team over the last few years, you're being critical in a negative light a lot of the times. It's hard to do. But the most rewarding thing is when the coach comes out and he speaks on a Thursday, and he paints just such a beautiful picture of what everybody saw on Sunday, what we discussed Monday and Tuesday, and Matt Burke did that today with this defense. The film doesn't lie. And what the film shows, the Houston Texans' defensive issues were this past week. Matt Burke, he painted a beautiful picture and couldn't have been more spot on.
All right, I want to play a couple of cuts for Matt Burke of what you talked about because, one, he preached about, his linebackers and not sticking to blocks and talked about that as an issue because a big thing that jumped out was man, these linebackers are struggling in this game. This was Matt Burke, the DC today, talking about his backers.
The first part, I think, just as again, not just the linebackers. Obviously, it kind of manifests itself in them more. But we preach, about not getting sticky on blocks. And again, it's a different mentality. Old school, like hat in hands, butt press, and get these guys off. Like, man, our linebackers are 235 pounds taking on 300-pound linemen climbing on them. So. We preach just trying to get off blocks quick, like use your advantage. They're quicker, they're a little bit more twitchy, explosive, like punch off blocks quick, like don't finish block, don't get sticky. So I think that's a growth for that group, for anybody on the second level.
Turn me on, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say, and for you, I know, and I think we all like to hear more transparency and actually hearing coaches speak more. He didn't just leave it there. So that was with the linebackers. Then he talked about overall with the thought of his linemen included, because it's not just linebackers. This was Matt Burke talking about kind of piecing together the entire front seven.
I know, like, it all fits together, right? If linemen are climbing up to our linebackers freely, our D-line better make plays. Like, that's why we're attacking. That's why we're telling those guys to get off the ball in the backfield. If linemen are single blocking them and trying to climb up to second level, then they better make those plays. We expect them to do that with their leverage. If they're not, if those linemen are staying doubled at the line of scrimmage, then the linebackers better get involved and make those plays. I mean, that's the game. I think that's the oath that you strike with those guys.
And listen, I love to see and hear that. Now we want to see them execute it on the field, because one of the things that jumped out to anybody watching it, you don't even have to be a great football fan, a large football fan to know, like, man, they're just running free. Yeah. Like, it's just easy run. Like, 3 of the touchdown runs, Clint, they were not even, and they weren't just 5-yard runs. Yeah. They weren't touched until they got to the goal line, if not touched. And that has to get cleaned up. And I think that's the front seven either getting dominated or just not doing their job.
Well, if you're out there as a fan and you watch last week's game and you're sitting there and you go, man, how in the hell did that happen? I mean, how did they had 3 rushing touchdowns of 47 or 48 total yards, and Anthony Richardson got touched 1 yard before he scored. Literally 3 that guys were untouched for 50-plus yards of touchdown runs, of scoring rushes. How does that happen? And look, you can flip it over on the other side and talk about the Indianapolis Colts defense and how they had so much success. It's the same. It's exactly what Matt Burke talked about. One team did it well, one team didn't. Watching the film, here's the thing: what as a defensive coordinator or a defensive coach or a player on the defensive side of the football, to me the number one biggest, most disrespectful thing that a team can do is go, we don't need double teams at the line of scrimmage. We're just going to shoot our uncovered linemen to the second level and let them get on y'all's linebackers. Y'all aren't good enough up front to command double teams, so we're just going to shoot uncovered guys onto the second level. Like, there's nothing more disrespectful in the game, in a contact sport like football, than doing that right there. Last week, the Colts were up front were as disrespectful to the Houston Texans as they could possibly be from that perspective. They had guys shooting to the second level immediately. And then what Matt Burke was talking about, linebackers would get on, they'd hit them, and they'd just get stuck on them. Defensive linemen, they'd hit them, they'd stop their feet, they'd just get stuck on them. You flip on the other side of the football, the Texans, when they were in a rush to get to the second level, right, those defensive tackles were hitting Dameon Pierce 2 yards, or disrupting the run, if not hitting Dameon Pierce 2 yards deep in the.
Yeah, you can't have both. You can't have your linebackers getting touched up and no one making plays in front of them.
When they were forced, when they stayed on D linemen to double team, then all of a sudden Teagan Quatoriano's having a hard time getting underneath the linebacker because the linebacker's so quick, and those guys are just free to roam. And as long as, again, this is unfortunate. It's super negative for the Texans, but on both sides of the football, until you got defensive linemen that command double teams, or when they're singled have the ability to make a play, and you have guys that refuse to stay blocked, you are going to be a poor defense. You're going to be a bottom third of the league defense. I don't care who your head coach is, who your defensive coordinator is, that's going to happen. On the offensive side of the football, until you have guys that can move defensive tackles with a double team, or they're good enough to take defensive tackles one-on-one, and your uncovered linemen can get to the second level and get on linebackers, until you have the ability to do one or the other of those things, your offense is not going to run the football well. Period. That's just the reality of the situation. Now, last week, maybe it was worse last week because guys didn't have energy. Guys didn't have juice. Guys weren't locked in. Guys, for whatever reason, I don't know how the hell that happened, but for whatever, maybe that was a one-off. And D'Amico can get this thing right. But I'm going to tell you, it's hard to overcome that very basic principle of playing line of scrimmage football on either side of the rock.